Thanks very much. So you've really had planning schemes, you've got it coming out of your ear holes now, so I'm really going to summarise things, and I'm just going to quickly drill down on the ESO and the neighbourhood character, which includes the zoning. So when we just went into the land.vic.gov.au, there were the overlays, but there was also a zone associated with every property there, and looking at more in terms of the landscaping side. So just with the environmental significance overlay, look, we've already been through this, so I won't. But Hugh touched on maybe waterways, but also on with the eastern councils, there's a lot of significant native vegetation, and some of the eastern councils have had sites of biological significance reports done throughout their municipality, and these ESOs are attached to those. So a lot of significant vegetation there, and as arborists we need to be aware, and also when we go into these different municipalities, it really pays in terms of tree ID. Each municipality will have its suite of native vegetation, and that will cross over obviously, but it pays to actually look online, and which can help us identify some of the native veg, because it'll have a list of the native veg with the different EVCs, which can really help when it comes to IDing and identifying the indigenous vegetation is very important with these sites. So here's an example in Knox, and I just wanted to bring it up. So for example, the Environmental Significance Overlay Schedule 2 in Knox, it talks about a permit is not required to remove, destroy or lop vegetation that is not indigenous within Knox. So once again, it's important that we can identify this vegetation accurately. And just to recap the whole thing, so we've gone into our, say we've been asked to engage to do a report on a particular property in Baronia, and it's got a SLO2, an ESO2, a DDO2, Design and Development Overlay, Schedule 2, and a General Residential Zone 2. So we've got, our property report shows all of those overlays and zones on the property. So as what has already been said, the different schedules will have different triggers on them. So in this situation, there's no size here, but it's got to be indigenous to Knox, but there could also be a significant landscape overlay on this property that we're looking at, which specifies, say, a permit is not required if the tree is less than 5 metres tall, less than 50 centimetres circumference. So there's different triggers. So one, you have to consider both of them. This has no size limit. The SLO has a size limit. So with the indigenous vegetation, you assess that different to that caught under the SLO, the non-indigenous. Can you see what I mean about having to look at all the schedules and the different aspects of them when understanding what requires a permit to be removed? And so on this particular example, there's also a DDO2, and design and development overlays is not considered normally a tree control, but in some councils there are. In this situation, excavation or filling is not occurring within the root zone of vegetation that would require a permit for its removal. So you might be called out, someone wants to do some buildings and works, dig a swimming pool or something, and there might be this SLO and an ESO, and they wanted to start doing some digging within the root zone. Well, that's why you've also got to check this DDO, and as you run through the schedule, you find, well, actually, you can't go in that root zone, because funny enough, the SLO and the ESO, if they're just doing buildings and works and not a development as such where TPZs would be involved, they don't actually, it's a very grey area, because they talk about remove, destroy and lop, but when it comes to excavating and fill, where is that line? Well, this gives protection. So I guess what we're trying to say is, when going to that particular property, make sure you look at all the schedules and anything to do with the trees that is affected. Because sometimes we do get caught out, we just look at one and miss the others, and suddenly we've done something against what would require a permit. And as I said, look at other overlays, like the bushfire management overlays, has already been said. All right, now just to wrap it up, the neighbourhood character, Hugh mentioned clause 55. We just quickly whip through these. It talks about to encourage the retention of mature vegetation on site, and it's important when we do our reports that we're actually specific. We'll do our visual tree assessment, and we might comment on different trees, but I think it's important that we do actually give that tree a retention value. Sometimes we don't, and it's important for the landscape character. If that tree, we might make some comments, but we should really recommend whether that tree should be removed or retained, because, for example, if there's a large liquid amber in the front setback, it looks reasonably healthy, has good structure, but it's got bacterial wetwood and it's in decline, and we know that that tree is not going to be there for the long term. It's important that we indicate, oh, this tree should be removed and replaced with new vegetation for the landscaping. Yeah, we'll just keep moving. The development should provide for the retention or planting of trees. So we might be asked to advise the person who's engaged you on replanting even. Us as arborists, we have an understanding of what species could be replaced. So councils are more and more requiring landscape designers for landscape plans, but there is a role for us to play as arborists to advise on replacement species. So it's worthwhile thinking about that. And clause 55, the res code, asks the applicant or developer to think about these things so we can advise on these things. Down the bottom, development should meet any additional landscape requirements specified in the schedule. So once again, this clause 55 is a general Victorian planning policy, but you drill down to the zone. So I gave the example of a general res zone, Schedule 2, and in Knox, there is, when you drill down to the schedule, there's a whole heap of requirements when it comes to replanting. So once again, as arborists, it's good for us to be able to go to the planning scheme, look at these schedules for the overlays and the zones, see what's required, then we're in a good position to tell our client these are all the requirements from council. And that's what, so really the big thing for us is the planning scheme is this big, absolutely big schedule with so much stuff. If you can drill down to the things that you need to find, then that's where you can really help your client. And I'll leave it there.